Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the study session. So I'm trying as much as possible, or let us try as much as possible to make this session an interactive one, right? We are not strictly going to go by any topic or syllabus or something, but I made this list because most of the times the exam questions are around these services, right? The new ones that come in, we can have storage, right? And these ones you get maybe one or just two questions on some of, the new ones that you haven't seen, the FSXs, the EFSs, and then all those things. And those ones, there are some keywords that you just have to look out for. But mainly, you are going to have questions, a lot of questions, let me put it that way, around these topics, all right? A lot of questions around these topics, from IAM to S3 to, EC2, databases, Route 53, VPCs, high availability architecture, applications. These are for, decoupling, and then also having a serverless architecture, right? And then security per se. Also, there are a lot of questions, but it encompasses advanced IAM, you have KMS, right? You have WAF. All the security tools that you can have from here. What again? I think Security Hub, Shield, right? And Shield Advanced. Okay. And then serverless, we look at Lambda, Dynamo, DB. You have API gateway in there. Right. Now let's start from IAM. So throughout our lessons or throughout our sessions, we are going to look at all these, right? Throughout every day, at least we look at two each session. I think will be done by the time all of us write the exam. So in IAM, you are looking at user management, all right? Okay, so you are looking at user management. You are looking at policies, all right? So user management, we can talk of authentication, authorization, right? The MFAs and then all that. Okay. All right. So these are the basic things that you will be examined on. So you have a question that's, you might be given an IAM policy, all right? Some of the IAM questions that you have, you might be given an IAM policy that will tell you to, or ask you to say what the policy does, right? After here, I will let us look at some questions, the dumps that we solved earlier. Then, all right, okay. Now for user management, what we are looking at, creating users and ensuring the principle of what least privilege. So, say you have a set of developers, okay, and you have a set of, let's say, Q&A, that is quality and assurance testers who work in the same organization. Okay, now at a point in time, developers need to access certain let's say EC2 instances in the Q&A environment. What do you do? Okay, then you have the options that will say that create a group for the developers and then add a policy that allows them access to those services in the Q&A environment, right? And then put all those users, the developers, in that group. Okay. There will also be an option where you have to create an IAM role, right? So that these users or these developers will assume that role anytime they would want to access the EC2 instance in the Q&A environment. And then the right answer is always going to be IAM role. So anytime you see you have a set of developers or you have a set of users or you have whatever, and at a point in time, so there's always going to be that factor. At a point in time, they need access to a certain service. So it means that they don't always need to have access, or they are not always accessing that service. It is at a point in time, or maybe at a stage in their work, they would want to have access to certain services. Then in that case, you don't have to give them a full permission to that service, but you have to give them an IAM role. So anytime they will want to access that service, then they will now assume that IAM role. Immediately they are done with the role, they are done with whatever they are doing, then their right or their permission or authorization is ended there. All right. So when you look at the real life example, so at this moment, we are using ALX's Zoom account, right, to hold our session. So we realized that when I wanted to record, I needed a role, right? I needed to be made a host before I'll be able to record. Now, when this meeting ends, my role is over. In the next meeting, I will not be a host, right? The original host or whoever set up the meeting will have to come in and then make me a host again before I'll be able to record. So that is how rules work, right? That's how rules work. You only function when you assume that role. Immediately the job is done, then your role is also taken from you. Okay, so that is how IAM rules work. So anytime you see that users don't have to access a service all the time, but they will need it once in a while, then you make use of what? IAM rules. Please, I hope that makes sense. Oh, sorry. I hope, yes, I hope you all understand what I'm trying to mean. And then you come to policies. So policies are just a written document that specifies what a user can do, and then what service or what identity. So they are assigned to identities. What identities can have access to it. So, okay, Auntie Maggie, you have your hands raised. You can ask a question.
All right. Good evening. So, on the user management, I wanted to find out. Assuming we are having this session for about 4 or 5 times
Right.
before we write the exams,
Yes.
is it possible for you to be given that role for that period instead of giving you that role for, every session?
Okay. So the principle of least privilege states that you give users the permission to do what they need. All right. So the fact that you are going to do it 4 times or let's say 5 times before everybody finish writing, they can't permanently make me a host. So it means that they will have to now put me into their whatever the Zoom configuration. They have to add my email address into it, so that I should even be able to set up the meeting myself. You get it? And per the principle of least privilege, that is not it. Because when that happens, it means I have access to ALX's Zoom account, and then what again? I am able to even track the meeting history that they have. You get it? One, I am an external person. I am not an ALX staff. So with the principle of least privilege, it's better I just assume that role anytime the meeting starts. Okay. So yes, I think there is a setting in Zoom that can be made that way. That for that particular meeting that have been set, I can be a co-host. My email will just be added to that meeting. So I only assume that role anytime we are having this meeting, and as far as we are using this link. Please, I hope that is clear.
Okay, that's fine.
Yes. So
Yes, please.
with the principle of least, that is how it is. I am only restricted to just this meeting as a host, to just this meeting. Any other meeting that I join, I can just join as a member. Any other question?
I think it's clear.
All right, great. And then with policies, as I said, policy is just a JSON document that is attached to an identity or a service or a user or a role. Okay, so whatever is defined in that policy or in that JSON document is what we call the permissions, right? Let me try and then open my AWS console and then. While I try to open my console, if anybody has any other question, it shouldn't even be with IAM alone, right? If anybody has any other question, ask while I try to. Okay.
Hello. Yeah, Kezia. Evening. How are you?
Please kindly
Yeah,
mute.
my dad took your number yesterday at Castle Market. Remember?
Hello.
Okay.
The Castle Market Squad.
Mhm. Okay. All right. So let me just click on the policy. So here there is a policy here. Let me just click on it and then we'll see what it is. So if I go to the JSON, all right. So this is an example policy. All right. And in a policy, you have the version that is the most the compulsory part of a policy. So you have the version, you have the statement, and then under the statement you have the effect and the action. All right, and also the resource. So here this policy allows you to what describe tags. So if you are able to get metric data, all right, you are able to view EC2 instances and then view their details. And then also you're able to get a metric data from CloudWatch. This is one policy. So I can have this policy without this. All right. And then there is also another permission or policies that also allows me to get an insight rule report. I'm able to view alarms and I'm able to also get dashboard details. Okay. And then the resource is what? It's CloudWatch. Here is what? Every resource. Okay. So this is an example of what? A policy. So in a policy is just a JSON document. And then in the policy, permissions are what? Are defined. All right. I talked about the user groups when I was making the developers example. So here I've created a group as what? As admin. So this one is effective or is needed when you have a bigger size of you have a bigger number of staff that you manage. Okay. So instead of you to create the users one after the other and then assign permissions to them, you can create a group. So here I have an admin group. So I can have all my administrators added. I have only one user added, right? So I can have all my administrators added in this group, and then I only have to assign the permissions to this group, and then every user in that group is going to have that permission. All right. So that's how groups also works. And then I've talked about roles. So here I think I have a lot of some of the roles they are automatically generated when you use some services, right? So For example, EFS, this one was automatically generated, all right, when I use the EFS service. And when I use the must see service too, it is, so you can see some are service linked rules. So these are all service linked rules. These ones, this I created it myself. I created this myself. I created this myself. All right. So that is also about it for user rules. The users, I mean, IAM. All right. Let me see if I have the questions. In this. I'm trying to get some questions on IAM, and then I think for yesterday at this moment, it's a no-brainer for us. You know, it's just for object storage and then for static objects, right? So anytime you hear you want to host a static website, you want to store your objects in a flat storage format, all right, then you will want to, you have to think towards S3. Oh, and anybody who has a PDF or has a version of Stefan Marek's course, kindly take it serious. It's very good. Why? I mean, this is what helped me, you know, pass my exam. This was my only extra resource. And the question comes from piece of code as well. I'm just trying to get some questions for us to look at, yeah. And I will use that to do some explanations. So IAM. Let's look at the advanced. There is a quiz on it. Oh, just 5 questions. Okay, great. So this says, let me zoom in. So you have a strong regulatory requirement to only allow fully internal audited AWS services in production. You still want to allow your teams to experiment in a development environment while services are being audited. How can you best set this up? Okay, so this is a typical exam question, right? A typical solutions architect exam question. So you have a strong regulatory requirement to only allow fully internally audited AWS services in production. So it means that you only have to use services that are audited by AWS. However, you still want to allow your teams to experiment in the development environment while services are being audited. So how can you best set this up? This one says, provide the dev team with a completely independent AWS account. This one also says, apply a global IAM policy on your production account. Here also says, create an AWS organization and create 2 production and devs organizational units. All right. Then apply a service control policy on the production organizational unit. And this one also says, create an AWS config rule. Now let's do an elimination. Now, a global IAM policy on the production account. Yeah, I don't see the reason why we should even use a global IAM policy on the production account. All right. This is a question that I've forgotten, honestly. Right. It's a question that I've forgotten the answer. But we are trying to do some elimination here and then arrive at the correct answer. Okay. Now, a global IAM policy is a policy that you are kind of adding to, how do I even put it? So it's one IAM policy, all right? But then anybody at all that is using the account, or anybody at all that is under that production account. You know, you can have multiple accounts under one account, especially if it is an AWS organization account. So if you have an IAM, a global IAM policy, then it means that the policy applies to every account there. Okay. Now, providing the dev team with a completely independent AWS account is also not it, because you still want to regulate what they do there, right? What they do under the account, okay? And then we know AWS config is for tracking configuration changes, right? AWS config is for tracking configuration changes. So it is also not the best solution for that. So here we have eliminated the global IAM policy. We have eliminated providing a completely independent AWS account, and then we have also eliminated config group. So we are left with what? Creating an AWS organization, and then creating two organizational units, right? So the production organizational unit, and then the developers organizational unit. Then you apply a service control policy on the production organizational unit. So what are service control policies? So they are policies that allow you, or that helps you regulate which services are allowed to use in an AWS account. Okay, so this is different from an IAM rule or an IAM policy, right? This one, you are controlling which services that you will be using. So it means that this one, it can prevent a user from just going to the market, the AWS market, right? There are services there that other external vendors sell there, all right? They offer for a fee. So with service control policies, you can't just go to the marketplace and then purchase any service and then decide to use it, right? You are able to say that, okay, you can, everybody under this organization or under this organizational unit is able to use only services that AWS themselves have internally audited them and then approved. Please, I hope that is clear. All right. So we only have this left as the answer. Okay, and that is the correct answer as well. So you don't look at, when you are thinking of controlling different teams, right, under an organization, then you are thinking of organizational units. So under an organizational unit, you can have multiple IAM users. You can even have multiple IAM groups, user groups, right? Correct. So I spoke about policies. Now let's look at this IAM policy and then the question that comes with it. So you are managing the AWS account for your company, and you want to give one of the developers access to read files from the S3 bucket. Auntie Maggie.
Okay, so for the first questions,
Right.
I mean the answer that we choose, I want to find out how does allowing
Service
SCPs,
control.
yes, how does allowing it in production grant access for developers in the dev environment?
No, so how do I even go back? It looks like I can't go back. Okay, so let me open the annotator. I wanted us to. Okay, I think we can restart. We can restart the quiz if the question is not randomized. Resume. Okay, I think we cannot go back. But let me. So the question says that the dev, right? The dev teams will still want to experiment, right? Now it is only in production. So let's understand the question well. It is only in production. It is only services that have been internally audited that are allowed to be used in production. But however, the dev team will still want to what? Experiment other services. So it means that the dev team has the freedom to experiment other services which are not even audited. All right. But then you will still want to regulate the activities of both production and then dev.
Development.
Correct. So in AWS organizations, you have what we call the organizational unit. So you are able to set service control policies to one organizational unit. So the option that we had was that we create the OUs for dev and then production, and then we apply the SCPs to the production. So it means that services that are used in production are only internally audited services. But for the devs, they are free to do whatever. They are free to experiment with other services as well. So the question is not seeking for a policy or a permission that will allow the dev to do whatever they want to do. It's just to make sure that the company is able to regulate or monitor whatever they are doing. But then the strict rules applies to the production environment. Please, is that clear?
Okay, yeah, that's clear. I
Yeah.
was thinking it's only limited to the audited service.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. So here says you are managing the AWS account for your company and you want to give one of the developers, right, access to read files from an S3 bucket. You have updated the bucket policy to what we have here, but he still can't access the files in the bucket. What is the problem? All right. So as I said, so he has the statement, and the statement so allows read, and then the effect is what? To allow the principal, that is the account that has access to, right? The account that they are attaching this policy to is what? So the user is what? Dave. Okay. And the action is to what? Is to get object. Now the resource is AWS static files, blah, blah, blah. So that's the name of the bucket's name. All right. But they say the user still can't have access to. So what is the problem? Now he says everything is okay. He just needs to log out and then log in again. By elimination, we know that this is not correct. When you apply a policy, you don't necessarily have to. You don't have to log out and log in, right? And then this one also says the bucket does not contain any files yet. Well, this kind of this want to make sense, but then the fact that there is no object in the bucket doesn't, because the thing is that he can't access the files. All right, he can't access the files. So whether there is an object or there is no object, and also near the end. So by elimination, even though we have not read the last answer, it makes the last answer automatically correct because these options are not valid. And then this is a typical exam situation. Sometimes the question seems to confuse you or you don't seem to get the correct answer. By reading some of the options, you get to know that no, the options doesn't make sense. So you do your elimination and you are left with one. And then this is correct because the rule is to allow the person access files from the S3 bucket. Now, here the resource is only stating the bucket. Okay, so if you are given this rule, you can access the bucket, all right, but you can't get objects from the bucket. So you need to add the full path. Okay, so he said what is an object level permission. So you have to allow the full path of the object for you to be able to, read it. So you need to add the slash asterisk. And then this asterisk means that every object in the bucket. Okay. Every object in the bucket. So this should be the correct answer. Okay. Is there a question? So here, if the permission was to be a list, right? If the permission was here, action, let's say, is a list bucket, right? If the permission was to be list bucket, then this would have been correct because it's a bucket level permission. All right. Let's go to the next one. So you have 5 AWS accounts that you manage using AWS organizations. You want to restrict access to certain. So this one is also, a no-brainer. So you want to restrict access to what? Certain AWS service in each account. Right? How should you do that? This is similar to the dev and then the production thing that we're talking about. Okay. So IAM rules won't do that. AWS config, as I said, is for configuration management. All right. So we are only left with this. All right. Okay. Let's go to the next one. So which of the following IAM condition key can you use to only allow API calls to a specific region? So here, when we get to API gateways, we'll get to understand. So API gateways are kind of, they are one of the services that are used for serverless architectures and then also decoupling architectures. Okay. So if you have a service, and mostly it is used with Lambda. Question 4. This is question 4. Okay, question 3. Question 3 was the restricting access to certain services. So immediately you see anything on restricting access to services. Okay, restricting access to services. Then you are looking at service control policies. And then the question specifically stated that you have multiple, so 5 AWS accounts, and then you are managing it under AWS organizations. All right. So you use a service control policy to restrict access to certain services. All right. They are different from roles. So if even if you have, let's say you have an IAM permission, right? There is an IAM rule that allows you to, let's say, describe EC2 instances. Okay. You are able to describe or even launch EC2. Let's say just describe, not launch. Describe EC2 instances. And then a service control policy restricts you access to an EC2. It means that you cannot even access the EC2 service itself. Okay, so that is how service control policies work. You're welcome. All right. So with API gateway serves like an intermediary. All right. So let's say you have a simple web application that allows users to fill forms. Okay. So by the click of a button, the form will just appear and then the users will fill it. Now you can set up an API gateway. I've forgotten the diagram for API gateway. So I'll just do anything. So you have a user, all right, accessing the service, and then you have your API gateway in the middle. So by the click of a button, by the click of a button, now the API gateway is now going to call the form, all right, for the user to fill. And then when they click submit, the form is, and then the form can be on a Lambda function, okay? Can be on a Lambda function. So this is a typical serverless architecture. Most of the time, you're going to see this thing a lot. All right. They are based on user requests. So you configure an API gateway which will trigger a Lambda function every time. And most of the times, this one goes with the API gateway. All right. So if you want to set up an IAM condition that can only allow API calls to a specific region, then what IAM condition key can you use? All right. And then there are two condition keys. Okay. So this one is out. This one is out. And you have not seen them before. There are two condition keys, right? That is a source region and then requested region. And the source region is always where the service is staying. Okay. And then the requested region is where the API calls is coming from. So the correct answer will be the requested region. Okay. So even with EC2, most of the questions you will see, there will be an IAM. You will come by this question maybe once or twice. You might not even get it at all. So the question will give you the IAM policy and you see source region, right? Condition, source region is maybe is equal to US East 1, or sometimes requested region, US East 2, and they will tell you to explain, choose the answer that explains the policy. All right. So a source region is where the service is, and then the requested region is where the API calls is being sent to or is being requested from. All right. Let me clean the drawings and then check the answer. Okay. Please, is there any question? You are going to the last question, so I'll pause for any questions then before we move on. You can put the question in the chat box as well. Okay, let's move on then. So the last question. So when configuring permissions for event bridge to configure a Lambda function as a target, all right, you should use what? But when you want to configure a Kinesis data streams as a target, you should use, so here we are looking at policies. So there are two types of policies, right? There is identity-based and there is a resource-based policy. Okay, there is identity-based and there is a resource-based policy. Now, when you are dealing with Lambda functions, even if you give an IAM role to an event bridge to access a Lambda function, you should also set a policy on the Lambda function to allow event bridge. Okay, so as far as the Lambda function is the target, then you should configure a policy on the Lambda function to what? To allow event bridge to do whatever they want to do as on the Lambda function as a target. Now, Kinesis data streams, on the other hand, is so there are resources in AWS that are considered as identities. All right. So if you want to configure Kinesis data streams as a target, I mean, when maybe we'll look at Kinesis data streams when we go to data processing and I think decoupling architectures as well. All right. As a target, then you have to set up an identity policy. All right. You set up what we call an identity policy. So an identity policy is set up on users and then services that are considered as identity. But with Lambda here, the catch here is even what Lambda function. Anytime you are talking about policies, right? Anything based policy, either identity based or resource based policy. If your Lambda function is a target, then you are looking at setting up what a resource based policy on the Lambda function to allow other services to trigger that Lambda function. So Lambda functions are triggered, but for Kinesis, you don't trigger Kinesis, right? Kinesis itself is a service on its own that functions. So Kinesis more or less is like what? An identity. All right. Kinesis itself is like an identity. So for this, you have to set up an identity-based policy for Kinesis. All right. So we look at the statements that fit in, the policies that fit in the right this thing. So here we'll cancel resource-based, and then we'll cancel what again? Identity-based. And as I said, Lambda function as a target, what? Resource-based. So here, resource-based is first, all right? And then Kinesis data streams identity, and identity is second. So this will be the correct answer. All right. So that is, just a high-level overview of of IAM. All right, let me look at the other one, if we can do it. IAM, the very first one. Where is it? There should be IAM. Yeah, IAM and then CLI. Open it. Retry. Okay. So this one is asking, what is a proper definition? You hardly get a question like this. All right. You hardly get a question like this. What is a proper definition? Like the straightforward ones. These are cloud practitioner level questions. But then, just in case you get them. So what is a proper definition of an IAM rule? Right?
Isaac. Hello, Isaac.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. So, like,
Okay.
how many services are like the Kinesis it has characteristics like the Kinesis instead of resource based, they are identity based. Any number of specific
For the number,
services like that besides Kinesis?
as for the number, honestly, I don't. There are a lot. There are a lot of AWS services. They are plenty. But most of the times that you are going to be asked questions on resource based and identity based, all right, in comparison with Lambda function, always know that resource based policies are for Lambda functions. And in the scope of solutions architect, they are not going to ask you like a lot of questions, even on resource based policies. Okay. So for IAM, I think that let me give you. So for IAM, they are mostly going to ask you about roles. All right. They are going to ask you about, yes, a resource based policy. And then mostly always it is with Lambda. And they are going to ask you IAM and then KMS. Okay. So you would want to use a KMS key for decryption and encryption. How do you set that? So you have to also set a resource-based policy on KMS for, let's say, an EC2 instance to be able to use the KMS service. All right. Even on Lambda, you have to set an IAM policy, right, to allow for the KMS service to allow Lambda to also use the KMS key. Okay, so most of the time, that's how the questions are set up. All right. So the proper definition of IAM role. So let's see. So the first one says IAM users in multiple user groups. Okay. So this one, our Indian guy, popular phrase will say, this one doesn't make sense.
I don't
All
even know
right.
why they added it.
And then this one also says an IAM entity that defines a password policy for IAM users. This is also not correct. All right. So because password policies are defined by you, you the account owner, or let's say the admin. So this one says an IAM entity that defines a set of permissions for making requests to AWS services and will be used by an AWS service. So this one kind of makes sense, right? But let's read the second one. So here, I'm not trying to let us pinpoint correct answers. I'm just trying to use the methods that I learned to, answer my questions. Elimination. All right. Now, this one also says permissions assigned to IAM users to perform actions. Now, this one kind of has answered is what's it called? It has reviewed what it is, all right, even with the answer. So this is a permission, or we can also call it a policy. I said that a policy is just a JSON document that defines permissions. So if these are permissions assigned to users to perform actions, then this is more or less like a policy, right, than an IAM rule. So it leaves us with what? This one. So it's an entity. Yeah. So a role is what? An entity first, and then also defines what? Set of permissions, okay, for making requests to AWS services, and then will be used by what? An AWS service. So that is why we are able to set an instance rule for an EC2 instance to access or to have access to what? The SSM parameter store, correct? So this. Now let's go to the next one. So which of the following is an IAM security tool? Right? Which of the following is an IAM security tool? Now, let us do elimination here. So there is nothing like a root account manager. Okay. Now, for my best of knowledge, there is nothing like a security advisor as far as IAM is concerned. Okay. And now there is no services under IAM. Okay. IAM in itself is, I think, is a service under is it control tower? No, control tower is the top one. I've opened my console. Let's just look at it. Organizations or control tower, either one is under it, right? So there is actually no service under IAM. So you don't have anything like IAM service report. All right. So it leaves us with what? IAM credential report. Okay. And then the credential reports is it's list all your AWS users and then also the status of their credentials. So sometimes you can set an expiry for a password. So with the credential report, you are able to see if this user's password is expiring, anything that has to do with the account. And then with IAM, we are even we are looking at what? Credentials. Immediately, you are talking about IAM. You are looking at credentials. You are looking at users. You are looking at roles. All right. So this leaves us with only this. And then, so it's credentials reports. Okay. So as we can see, list all your users' accounts, IAM users, and then the status of their various credentials. Okay. Now the next question. This is asking what is, and then let's pay attention to some of these things. Okay. What is correct? What is incorrect? What is true? What is false regarding something? Question? Rubicon. All right. Regarding a question. So you might read them and you see like, where you're correct, where you're correct, where you're correct. So which one is the answer? All right. So most of the times you have to look at this one. We are looking at the incorrect one. All right. So the first one says IAM users can belong to multiple user groups, which is true. Okay. I made mention that if you have, let's say, 10 group of users or staff that you have to manage, and then all of them, you'll have to set policies or permissions for them. Okay, it means that you create one user, you set the policy, you create another user, you set a policy. That might take you, let's say, an hour. All right, hypothetically, it takes you an hour. What you can do is that you can just create a group, assign this policy. All right, you just assign the permission, because they are, maybe let's say you have you are setting a permission for your internal audit. Okay, you are setting users for, they all work at the internal audit department. So you just attach the policy that they need, general one, and then you add the 10 users here. All right, that will be it. So you can have, and then one, maybe this one is one internal audit member is also what's it called, a payroll, right? A payroll member. So they are in internal audit and as well as payroll. So the same user can belong to these two groups, all right, together with other users. So this user will have the policy attached to the internal audit as well as the payroll. So they can, I mean, so IAM users don't have to belong to a user group. I don't know what this means, so I'll just leave an asterisk here and go and come back. All right. Now, IAM policies can be attached directly to IAM users. This is also true. Okay. This is also true. And this one says IAM users access AWS services using root account credentials. Now, this is false. Okay, this is false. As immediately you become an IAM user, if you are an IAM user, then you don't need the root user account credentials to do anything, right? Because if I create the user, you have your permissions. I attach the permissions as to what you can do and what you cannot do. So you don't need the root user credentials to do anything. So this is false. So even though I don't know what this means, this is true. And then we are looking for the incorrect one. So from what I know, and then what I confidently know, I know this is false. So I will choose this. Okay. And then that is correct. And it says what? Let me clear the drawings. IAM users access AWS services using their own credentials. That is what? Username and password or access keys. So you don't need the root user credentials for anything. Yes, and then please, after the session, when we are done solving this set of questions, we'll end the session. Kindly fill the feedback form. Why? For us. So there is a feedback form. Eunice, you sent so let me copy it and then even paste it in the meeting group. Okay. Right now we are trying to measure the effectiveness of everything that we do. So kindly fill this. I mean, when you are done. So I've pasted it in the group chat. Right. Okay. So as I was explaining, you don't need a root user. In fact, with IAM best practices or security best practices, you don't even use a root user account for anything except for creating your AWS account. After creating your AWS account, it is recommended that you create a user and then give the user all the permissions that you think they need, and then you log out of the root user account and then start using your IAM user account as well. So the root user, you don't use it except when you want to delete your AWS account. All right. So this question, it looks like I might be a prophet in the future. Which of the following is an IAM best practice? Okay. So we are looking at the best practice. Now let's look at the first option. It says what? Create several IAM users for one physical person. This, right, doesn't make sense. Okay. We are recording this session. I would have used one of our Indian guys' favorite phrase, but I will not use this. All right. This doesn't make sense. So let's leave this. Now, don't use the root user account. What I just said before we came here. Okay. So this is correct. Okay. So this is the correct answer. So I won't even go because we are just looking for one. All right. We are selecting one. Which of the following? So I'll not even go ahead and then read this. Our Indian guy will say, oh, if you want to waste your time and then read it, you can waste your time and read it. So I'll not even waste my time to read the rest of it to see what they are. Okay. But you can see that they don't make sense. You share your credentials with your colleague, no? And then don't enable MFA. That is also not correct. Immediately you create your user account and then you log in. Create a multi-factor authentication. You realize that when I was logging into my account, I had a lot of codes to enter. After my email, I have to even enter a pop-up password before my password will be populated. And then I had to enter an MFA code, right? So it's recommended that you use MFA. So you don't use your root user account. What are IAM policies? Right now, these are one of these. But anyway, as I said, it's hardly unless just because I didn't face this, and I don't think all of us who have written it saw questions on what is this, this is like a practitioner kind of vibe, right? Anyway, but let's go into it. So what are IAM policies? So it says what? A set of policies that defines how AWS accounts interact with each other. Now, I would have considered this one as a correct answer, but the fact that there is what? Policy in here. All right. The fact that there is a policy in here, because we are asking what an IAM policy is. So the answer should explain what a policy is, but shouldn't mention a policy. So this one doesn't still defines what a policy is, what an IAM policy is. I hope you all agree with me. This is English. Let's even
Yes.
let's even forget about what a policy or whatever it is. But this is just English. If I'm looking for the meaning of policy, then the answer shouldn't include the word as well, because I want to know the meaning of what a policy is. So it means that I am not going to choose anything that says policy. So this is a simple like elimination method, right? Anything that says policy or that has policy in it, I'm not going to even look at it. So I'll not read them. Now let's go to the B. A JSON document that defines a set of permissions for making requests to AWS service. So looking at what? A set of permissions. All right. As I said, correct. So as I was explaining, a policy is just a set of permissions. Okay. So you can have just one permission or you can have different types of permissions. And I demonstrated it on the console where we had 2 permissions for all services and then the CloudWatch service. All right. So a set of permissions for making requests to AWS services. So requests to AWS services and can be used by IAM users, user groups, and IAM roles. So this is correct, right? And then you can see this is correct. All right. Which principle should you apply regarding IAM permissions. So these are the questions that you don't waste your time, right? So list
2
privilege.
seconds.
So here you don't even bother reading through. Immediately you see which principle should you apply IAM permissions, list privilege. So you just go through it looking for list privilege. You choose your answer and then you move. Don't bother yourself about the rest, whether you are correct or wrong. Okay. This one you answer it with your full chest. Just answer it and move on. AWS they mark confidence as well. So I'm lying. Okay. So this one also says, what should you do to increase your root account security? So in IAM best practices, first, when you create your root account, now you have to, I said earlier, you have to enable multi-factor authentication. That's the first thing. In fact, immediately you create your AWS account and then you log in, the first thing you need to do is to enable what? Multi-factor authentication. All right. Now let's look at these options. This one says what? Remove permissions from the root account. This doesn't make sense. Only access AWS services through the command line interface. This is also, gibberish. I'm being tempted, right? Walai. Odeshi. All right. Now this also says don't create IAM users. Only access your AWS account using the root account. This is a blunder. All right. You don't do this. Like you don't do this at all. All right. Create users and then leave your root account alone. All right. Create users and then leave your root account alone. So if we have eliminated all this, then we are left with what? Multi-factor authentication. And that is our answers. So you see all this, I'm just using elimination, and then the little knowledge that I have about the services, right? There's nothing magical or anything about it. So we just have to go through the services and then we have an understanding of the concept. So we will look at, security, we will look at decoupling, we will look at resilience, we will look at high availability. The most easiest thing about solutions architect is high availability, multi-AZ, multi-region. If it is multi-region, the question itself would give you hints towards that. If it is multi-AZ, the question itself will give you hints towards that. All right. Okay. Let's look at the next question. So an IAM user can contain users and an IAM user groups can contain users and other user groups. True or false?
False.
Yes, this is false. So a group can contain only users. A group cannot contain a group. Okay. So we are talking of just IAM. So a group can only contain users. It cannot contain groups. So this is false. The last one. So an IAM policy consists of one or more statements. A statement in an IAM policy consists of the following, except. So we looked at an IAM policy. All right. Or let's just go back to the console and then we'll look at it. This one there. We are 12, right? How many are we? We are 12 here. So except me, we are 11. So I want 11 answers for this. So let's go to the console just for us to make sure that we are all on the same page. Okay. Or I should forget it and then you people will bring the answer. Let's go to the console. So I am in the IAM console. Let me just open one of the rows and then we'll look at the so this is okay. This is one policy. And then let's look at the JSON. Okay. So this is an IAM policy, a typical IAM policy. And as I said, it has what? A version and it has a statement. Okay. Now, within the statement, so all these are under the statement. All right. All these are under the statement. So the version is not part. Okay. So under the statement, the question is asking that a statement in an IAM policy consists of the following, except. Now let's look at here. What do we have here? We have this, we have this, we have this. Okay. There is one that didn't come. That is there's one that didn't come. Is what? Let me go to we'll see it here. It's the principal, all right? The user that we are trying to attach that policy to. So now let's pick the odd one out. So I want to see 11 answers. JSON. No, let me go to the users. I think I had it. That is what had the groups. I think that's what had the principal, right? Anyway, if I don't see it, let's just go ahead and then answer our question and then we'll move on. So administrator access. JSON. Okay. Looks like they all don't specify the principal. But however, there is a principal under the statement. So let's pick the odd one out here. So I have 5. Hey, this is I had 13. So I need 12 answers. Let me open the users and I'll mention names. I beg we are all on the call. So I see James. I see God's gifts. I see Muse. Where's Prince? Oh, Prince is gone. Muse. I see Joshua. I've seen Margaret. And then DK. iPhone. I've not seen it. Okay, Godman also has brought his answer. Uma has brought his answer. Rubicon, where's your answer? Richard. Oh, I've not seen your answer. Who again? Okay. Sita, I've not seen your answer. Today, nobody should do stubborn academy. I beg all of you. This is our last question. So anyway, so that is it. All right. So and let me close this. All right. So and in an IAM policy and at the statement section, you have effect, you have the principal, you have the action, and then the resource. All right. So the odd one out is the version. The version is part of an IAM policy, but doesn't come under the statement. Okay. So that is it. So a statement in an IAM policy consists of the statement ID. This one is an optional one. Okay. the statement ID is optional, so you can choose to bring it or not. It's just, let's say, a description of your statement, right? What the statement is doing. Okay, so and then a condition is also optional. All right. So you have the effects, the principle, the action, the resource. Version is part of the IAM policy itself, as I said, but not the statement. Okay, so that is all about it. So today I think that we've got to know a lot about IAM. God willing, in our next session, we will look at the other services and then also look at questions on them. All right. S3, like for S3 is one of the easiest questions that you get on S3. All right. So we'll look at it together with EC2 in our next session. And then if there is time, we even add database. Route 53 there, Route 53 and VPC, will treat them together. All right. And then we'll look at high availability architecture as well. For here, applications, it will be under decoupling. So if in your private studies, you also look at that, right? They will be under decoupling. Okay. And then security, we look at advanced IAM, a KMS, WAF, and then all the security tools that you can find here. All these ones, you might get 1 or 2 questions under each of them. Okay? And then we'll look at serverless. Most of the times, you are being questioned on serverless, security, all right, and then high availability. Okay, and database. Some people get database questions a lot. Okay, all right, and then if God permit and we have some time, we'll look at the storage aspect of things. And then please, all these things that we are coming to talk about, we've treated them before, and they are all recorded, and they are on my YouTube. So kindly find time. Yes, the videos are long, 2 hours, 3 hours, but you don't have to watch the entire 2 hours or 3 hours. There are portions that you need to watch, right? So you can be skipping them and then watching the needed parts that you think are necessary for you. I've titled, or yes, I've described the videos with the titles as to what topic was treated. So kindly make time to also, go through them. It makes things easy for all of us. Okay. So thank you for joining. If there is no question, so you can ask any question, whether it was a question that you met, that you've marked down, you saw a question somewhere, you can ask. All right. So that I'll try my possible best to give you an answer. And then please fill the feedback form. Let me paste it again. Right. Please fill the feedback form, because we just use it to measure the efficiency of the session. I'll also share another link with all of us. These are question sets that we practiced, prior to writing our exam. And a lot of people said they met these questions. Okay. Some even said they had all of these questions. I think we had about 30 questions or so. Right. Somebody said after we had finished solving in the exam, she had almost all of these questions. And you can see, if you all of us can imagine the joy that comes with it. So please, these are exam questions. So I'll share that in the chat as well. And then please be filling the feedback form. I beg you. It's just some tap, click, and then you are good to go. We are 13 here, so we should have 13 responses. And then I'm sharing the exam set as well in the page. So you do look at it. We have bolded some of the answers. Some of them, if you don't agree with it, you can put it down in our next class. Yes, that's the same question we solved. Yes, Godman, that's the same questions we solved, right? So for the benefit of or anyone who didn't join the session, right, and then is joining today, you can look at it. These are the set of questions that we solved. Okay, and then we use the same method that I used in solving these questions. elimination. Some of them we know. So some of them we don't know. So we use elimination and then we are good to go. So kindly also go through. And then there is this YouTube guy. The person who shared, that was Jason. I think he's not on the call. He shared it with me. Charlie, this guy, since then I always pray for him. Let me open my YouTube. Right. His name is Piece of Code. Right. Piece of Code. His YouTube really helped me to have this strategy, to craft this strategy for solving exam questions. So please, after you learn, you read your materials or your PDFs, then you come to Piece of Code. This is his channel. He does other courses, other videos. He posts other videos on other AWS courses as well, right? But I am interested in the exam questions for solutions architect. So let me go here. Great. So you see, he has these are 100. The 100 is in two parts, part 1 and then part 2. And then he has 200 questions, right? That are in 4 parts also. I think 4 or 5 parts. Okay, they are in 5 parts. All right. They are in 5 parts for solutions architect. So if you are able to watch these videos and then get to understand some of them, as I said, I was telling somebody that it doesn't mean that some of the answers that all the answers that he chooses are correct. Some are wrong, but the most important thing is that you are learning how to answer the solutions architect questions. And then trust me, when you use the strategy, you don't waste time on questions. Okay, you don't waste time on questions. Myself, when I was done with my entire questions, I had 45 minutes left. Right? And then I had to go through again. When I went through again, I had about 25 minutes left. Extra minutes. So I even got up. Let me stop recording.